Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Batman from 1989. And this is a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And this movie was chosen by Austin. Batman 89 is probably one of the most influential films on modern Hollywood blockbusters, as well as the film that let Tim Burton sort of do whatever he wanted for the rest of his career, not that he was hurting before necessarily, as well as rebooting and recontextualizing Batman for movie audiences and the mainstream forever after. You don't get Christopher Nolan and even the Batman with Robert Pattinson without this movie. Sure, yes, it had been building for a while. There had been comics, Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams, Frank Miller, but for most mainstream audiences, this was what set the dark, gritty Batman that used to be from its origins, from Frank Miller in the 80s and the 60s and all that, and forever after cinematically. This set the tone and set the bar, and it probably won't be reset. No one really wants it to. I kind of would sometimes. But this is the film that did it. And I almost look at this film in sort of two ways, because I look at this as a way to transition into what we would get from superhero movies and in Batman movies especially, and how it kind of had to like set the public up and introduce this kind of idea of Batman as a hero. This isn't really, people say, oh, it's sort of like the Superman movie. The Superman movie is very different in a lot of ways. You know, Richard Donner and Tim Burton are drastically different directors, and Richard Donner was looking at it as nostalgia for a comic book he read. Tim Burton was sort of assigned this, and as well as I would say their viewpoints on the two things is like Tim Burton found things about Batman that were interesting things were happening to Batman at the time in the comic books, as well as Superman brings Superman maybe to the 70s, but it's not like, hey, you know everything you knew about this guy? Well, fuck that. He's dark and gritty now, and you're gonna accept it, I guess. The Superman movie didn't have writing campaigns about its lead and things like that. It was very much like part of a Superman that they had known. Also, there hadn't been a 60s Batman show and the goofy 50s in terms of the comics and all those things that kind of changed the character. This is resetting everything. I think it is both a hard kind of gritty reboot as well as finally bringing Batman to the screen, which is pretty remarkable. You know, this is kind of introducing the gritty reboot of a character. This is introducing the comic book movie, introducing even how we do comic book casting now. All of it comes from this movie, and rewatching it, I kind of was shocked at how much it introduced. I didn't realize that. I hadn't watched it in a while. Now, when I was a kid, I was 5 in 1989. Well, I was for most of that summer. I turned 6. I wasn't allowed to see this movie, but it didn't matter because this movie was such a big deal. Like, even I, who didn't watch MTV, would turn on just to see the Prince Bat dance video, which would play a lot. Not a great song. That song, I don't know what's going on in that song. It's like a lot of weird nonsense, but the rest of the soundtrack by Prince is great, by the way. All the songs the Joker dances to, I quite like, especially as an adult. Way better than what any other Joker has danced to. Yeah, I'm gonna stand by that one. Prince is better than Gary Glitter. You can Google both of them, and it was such a big pop culture landmark. And in fact, like, I wanted to see this movie for years as a little kid. It wasn't until, I think it was right after Returns came out, that I was allowed to see it, and everyone went to mini golf, and I got to watch it when we were in Ocean City, Maryland, on a TV from a VHS that I think the other family that came with us had from HBO or something. I don't fully remember. I remember it was like not the official tape, which is pretty par for the course for my VHS collection growing up. But I think they were afraid it was too dark or scary or some thing they thought about not letting me watch movies at the time. I'd probably, if my kid really wanted to see it, unless it's like really violent or morally weird. It wasn't that violent, to be honest with you, but I mean, to me, I'm a bad judge at these things. They were concerned. Good for them, I guess. And I have a lot of memories of like being so in love with Batman at the time. I had like Batman bed sheets. I had Batman action figures. I had so many things, and I didn't even see this fucking movie in 1989. It was just such a massive thing. I cannot overstate how it was everywhere. Like, I think we went to the mall or something. It was in every store. You couldn't ignore it. And as a kid, it was just so hard to not be a part of it. Trust me. Anyway, they should have let me see it. I don't know what the big deal is. But I even remember there were so many posters everywhere. I was like, why would people want the posters of the Joker? He's a bad guy. I kept asking my parents, I don't get why people want a poster of the Joker. And, you know, now Jack Nicholson's like my favorite actor, so I guess I figured it out. But I was just like, so like, you know, I remember that logo. I remember everything. I have a lot of nostalgia for the moment of it. I have a lot of nostalgia for when I was allowed to watch it, rewatching it over and over with my friends and going over every stupid scene and explaining certain things and what was from the comics and what was changed and everything like that. And it was such a massive movie if you grew up into comics or into Batman in the 90s, that it just got so replayed. I can look at it as a part of film history and blockbuster history and where we are now and everything like that. But another part of me is like, this is just like so ingrained in my brain. I almost like didn't need to watch it. You know what I mean? Like, knew every scene to such a degree it was gross. I get how people were shocked by this. So I'd only seen it on VHS. I did get a DVD. And then the Museum of Modern Art in New York, they had a Tim Burton exhibit, and they were going to play all the Tim Burton movies on film. And they played Batman, and I said, you know what? I've never seen this thing on film. I always wanted to know what that was like, so I did. And the film print, which is a good print, by the way, it looks more like film noir. It looks like classic Hollywood in terms of way it looks on film. There have been I've seen color corrections where they make it look more modern and Marvel kind of which I really don't like. I don't understand what they're doing there. I've seen those on TV. The ones that are like the Blu-ray and 1080p things recently are fine. I kind of like the film print. I saw that one time because it really, how dark and like spooky and like this gothic sense to it, which definitely Tim Burton brought to it, but fits so naturally with Batman. You get the idea of Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which is in there. You got how Batman the Animated Series can come from it. You get a love of classic cinema while also being part of the 80s. It was such a mishmash of everything, and I think the film prints really show that. It really shows the darkness and the grain, and you can see all that in it. It feels almost more exciting and more classic on a film print. So I get like why people flip the fuck out, because this is not like anything at the time. I like Tim Burton's direction. I think what he's doing a lot, because this is maybe not, in some ways it is very Tim Burton. In other ways it's like the most calmed down he's been about his own style like ever. Maybe Pee-wee's Big Adventure and this, and after that he was like, fuck this, and like Batman Returns, everybody. You like let that auteur out. Holy crap. He's commented on how it's a hard production, it was the worst period of his life and everything like that. You can sense that this isn't him how we know him now, which is true. But I think having someone who's an animator, someone who's done multiple mediums, who understands how to be sort of loose and experimental and different, worked extremely well in this. This is also, like, I think a precursor to even what happened with Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings, even what happened with Sam Raimi and Spider-Man, where you picked a kind of oddball director to do a comic book movie. Do you really want Wolfgang Peterson doing this? Or they wanted Ivan Reitman. I'll be honest though, I think Joe Dante probably could have made a really good Batman movie, so I think he wanted didn't he want Lithgow as Joker or something like that? Anyway, I know some of the comments were like, he did, and tell me more about it, and feel free to, but I think you could only have this pop culture limb, because it was like a director who Beetlejuice was a hit, but it wasn't like this. And I think this is like a whole different kind of style, as well as Batman, as well as everything. But you look at some of the fights, and even like when he comes in the beginning, he just like swoops in with his cape and goes, I'm Batman and stuff. And on a surface level, if you don't film that right, that looks fucking dumb as crap. Like that, there are certain of the fights that I was like, because he's able to storyboard and effectively figure out shots in this and do it in the right kind of weird, strange way that's not sort of the normal way of shooting, it works. But if you get like a normal action director at the time, I do not see how this works at all. It completely falls apart, which is probably why you didn't have a million knockoffs going on throughout the 90s, because they were probably like, well, I can't do that. And guess what? They couldn't. I really think uniquely the way Tim Burton, this is probably the most like studio director he ever was, but he is talented enough to get that to work for him as a studio director. And I was noticing that throughout this, is like, he's really good with character, he's good with all the actors throughout the film and everything like that, but I do feel like how he gets Batman to move feels like kind of otherworldly, and how he's moving a lot of like intimidation with like scaring people, less like sometimes fighting in some places, and when he does, it's very like showmanshipy, but he's able to, like, you know, you can tell he's doing a bunch of cuts in it, but it feels so fluid, you sort of don't doubt it, you know. I was noticing it, but I was still like into the movie. You know, it has such a rhythm to it, but that's also because Danny Elfman is amazing with the score. Like, I know he had worked with Danny Elfman before, but whoa, this score is working overtime. It is sort of like John Williams' score in Star Wars or any of those great film scores, but it really overpowers it. Well, I don't want to say overpowers it. I would say it accentuates the film in such a way, like just the scene with Vicky Vale and him in the Batmobile could be a really quiet scene without that, and suddenly, like, you know, the reveal and like where are we going and like everything with Batman and like the mythos of it all goes throughout that score. That score is like beautiful and amazing, and the fact that they just let it play, that thing at the beginning where you're like, what's the camera doing? I remember watching that as a kid at the beginning. I'm like, what is that? Like, I was like confused, like, what is the camera doing right now? Like, what, I didn't say what is the camera, but I would be like, what's going on? What are these dark corners and stuff? Then it's like the Batman logo or symbol or trademark or whatever, and you're just looking at it and you're like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, they have like a cool intro in this, and Danny Elfman sells the hell out of this movie. Oh my god, such a good job with that score. I love that score. Michael Keaton is interesting as Batman because I think he's the only true Batman who came from my parents' generation, who's only like sort of the only real boomer Batman, I guess, or whatever. He's probably like the only Batman who conceivably could have gone to a Rolling Stones concert or something. He brings such an interesting sensibility to it because he is sort of playing like apparently more Bruce Wayne than he is playing Batman, but I think it's also that Tim Burton cast him as who can play the character, not who can pull off the action sequences. And that's something we'd see even when Robert Downey Jr. would be cast as Iron Man. This is a similar casting to that. I think people were shocked because Tim Burton came up with an idea of like, he's casting a part. He wasn't looking at who should play this hero, who should play this guy in this movie. And similar to, like, I think comic book casting has to be perfect, and Michael Keaton is just so great as Batman in this because he adds that kind of like spooky sense to it, how he wants to talk quieter. He doesn't have that like Batman voice, you know. He does it like him and Kevin Conroy have a similar thing where it's just a little deeper, it's a little spookier. You definitely feel different when you're wearing like that big rubbery whatever the fuck. It's such smart casting because he is kind of a weirdo kind of sensibility. He does have that like offbeat idea to him, you know, that you sense that he is a little different. He's a very smart guy, but you can't really quite crack him. And in a sense, like, I don't think you could ever crack or understand fully Michael Keaton. He feels like he's on his own wavelength, and you get that. That's a perfect idea for Batman. And I just love, he's just the Batman I grew up with, and Keaton's such a great kind of character actor. He was a leading man at the time. He had been in big movies, but he is far more of a character actor as a leading man, which is something, you know, that's something Tim Burton even liked in, you know, Johnny Depp and things like that. Although Keaton was much better at doing that than Johnny Depp. But you look at everyone else who did it, and they're all movie stars, you know, or they're people, other Val Kilmer, semi, you know, but like, you know, you're talking Clooney, Christian Bale, Robert Pattinson, Ben Affleck. They're movie stars. They're leading men. Michael Keaton, sure, he was a leading man, but his sensibilities are a little more like comedic. He can play different things. He has a broader range. He's more of a working man's actor. Those guys, not so much. And I think that's why his films always have a different sensibility to them. Also Burton, but, you know, as well as I really like Robert Wuhl. We never talk about him with Batman. It's always like the three leads, but man, I actually think he adds a lot to this movie. He's kind of like, also he's a platonic relationship with Kim Basinger. I think that's really cool. Michael Gough who has been in so many British things. Like I've seen him in Hannah Horror stuff. He's on Doctor Who. That's kind of like the classic kind of Tim Burton, like older Hollywood casting you expect. I didn't really know that till I was older. He was just Alfred to me, but he's so perfect as Alfred. He is kind of like a great British character actor. Tim Burton does like people who are in movies, and you can tell who is typical Burton casting and who isn't. As well as, you know, Kim Basinger is great. She's absolutely gorgeous in the whole thing, like classic movie star gorgeous. I know it was supposed to be Sean Young, but she's just so perfect with that kind of Veronica Lake hair going on throughout the entire thing. Like I just like, you know, she just looks like a beautiful movie star all throughout. I don't think I necessarily had a crush on her growing up or anything, but she always just looked like this like amazingly beautiful woman. She looks so done up and everything. It's like she has like a supermodel kind of look to her. And then there's Jack Nicholson. You know, a lot has been made on Jack Nicholson and everything he made from this movie and everything like that, but I think this is him at his most movie starness we've ever seen. It's like a huge peak for his career that I think he was relishing every second of. He made his own shooting schedule. He got a portion of the profits, including the merchandise. He made out very well, and he used his movie starness for every bit he could, but as well as like he's really great as the Joker. I think he looked at the Joker more so as like, what had Cesar Romero done? What do we knew about the Joker, but what can Jack Nicholson bring to it? And I think part of what makes Jack Nicholson a great Joker is you knew Jack Nicholson could do these weird things. You knew he was from Easy Rider. He was this like captivating guy from like Terms of Endearment and everything. He had that thing where you wanted to watch him. This movie is an origin story for only him, not Batman. Batman's already around at the time. Such a compelling presence on screen, but also like him going insane and being this super villain and everything like that. He's the kind of villain you want to follow. Keaton is really bringing it in those scenes because like working with Jack Nicholson on charisma on high. He's even talked about how it's like a really hard role to do the Joker because you constantly have to have everyone paying attention to you, which of course what the Joker would want, but he pulls the charm up to 11 and it feels so seamless, like he knows how to do it, but he is working like overtime in terms of like maybe chewing the scenery and everything, and that's not necessarily always Nicholson. He can do subtle. He's a much more diverse actor than we give him credit for, but he knows entirely what he's doing. He's entirely present and in the moment in a way that like I feel like Keaton and Basinger are not on the like next level, you know. They're being more like natural, and Nicholson's playing this as like movie star on high, irony, everything, like all the weird like artistic things he knows to dip into, and he might be acting like he's like a stupid older dude who just like mentions those things to get away with that behavior, but at the same time like he knows it. Like he knows exactly what he's doing throughout it. He knows if he's using like weird kabuki stuff and method and everything like that. It's one of those performances that I've always liked about him, and I like how far he goes with it and how extreme he goes with it. It's hard to miss him as the Joker. That was the best Joker you could do at the time, and I think like without him you wouldn't have what Heath Ledger did, what Joaquin Phoenix did, what Mark Hamill did. You wouldn't have that with Joker. He brought all that energy to it, and he knew what to do with that character in such a way. It's like I think where Joker is now as well is 100% because he brought everything to it. You know, he might have made all these demands, but he did an amazing performance throughout it. There has always been controversy with this film, especially like simplifying things, which I think was more done because they sort of knew people didn't know the comics as well. They hadn't been shown Batman's parents getting killed in every movie and everything. We didn't know these certain things. I honestly think that was done to like make the script tight. I don't think it was meant in a disrespectful way, but the whole idea of Jack Napier or the Joker killing Batman's parents and not Joe Chill was very not chill of them. But I think it's done to be like, what are we going to introduce Joe Chill all of a sudden and he's going to do it? Like, who cares about Joe Chill? You know, it's just like that doesn't really make a lot of sense if you're going to have it in the movie. The Joe Chill thing also, it's interesting that when you look at what happened with Spider-Man with Sam Raimi in 2002 Spider-Man, he chose not to do that, and he chose differently. Like, compare that to this film. I almost think it's smarter to pick the villain thing, have the hero and the villain at the same time. But I also think it works better for a character like Batman, who's mysterious, where Spider-Man, not necessarily that's his thing 100%. I get when comic book fans are not happy about it and how it was like sort of considered disrespectful. At the same time, you have to understand like they're trying to tell a story and they're sort of like pitching superheroes as serious stuff. Like the comic book boom was just sort of beginning in 1989. Like things were changing. Had they changed yet? No. So they were operating under that umbrella. And if you look under it on that guise, it totally works. If you look under it on the modern context, yeah, that's fucking bullshit. But like, don't look at it that way because this wasn't released now. It was released in 1989 in a different thing and people didn't view Batman that way. So like acting like us viewing Batman, it needed to change and they did it. I think they did it in an effective way. I'm sort of fine with it, but I get, as well as, you know, there was a writer's strike and the people who were writing it wouldn't have accepted that. So I think, I'm not sure who made those decisions ultimately. A kind of one of those massive films in film history. It was able to, it was the fastest film at the time to make $100 million. It was a film to show you could, I think they made their budget back in merchandise tie-ins and everything else before it had even been released. It showed Hollywood a different way to sort of make a movie. Especially that you could do this with a comic book. Not, you know, it had been done before with books. And a lot of people are saying this is showing Hollywood that the first time, you know, they could sell something just on a property, they were doing that by then, trust me. Also, you know, everything with Gone with the Wind, by the way, which came out in 1939, was based on the book, not the movie stars. Clark Gable helped, but it was the reason it was a massive deal was because of that. So this is not a new concept. I keep reading that. It's not true. But in terms of for a comic book, yes, it was new. And it was showing that there was a built-up demand for it. This film changed a lot of things financially, you know, going to VHS, early, everything like that. It was a financial, cultural juggernaut that in my childhood and from when I lived was something that just you couldn't get enough of, you know. Also Billy D. Williams, why wasn't he Two-Face? That still bugs me, but I love that he's in this. He's like the only person he was the most famous person to me when I originally saw it. I do really like this movie. It's still a fun movie. I don't know if I ever need to see it again in my lifetime. But I do really enjoy it. Every time I watch it, I was like, that was pretty fucking good. I don't know. It still takes me back to watching it in Ocean City in maybe 92, 93, I forget the year, on VHS by myself in a condo. It was, I think, a big bellwether moment. It showed the path that we were all going to be in. It definitely precurses a lot of things. I mean, you look at Spider-Man Homecoming, you basically have, you know, a new actor as a superhero and an established actor who probably is, you know, top billed, and the main and one of the big hype reasons you're seeing the movie is Keaton ended up doing the Nicholson thing in the end, which is amazing. I don't know if this is Burton's best movie, but I think it is Burton at his most under the studio control, but it still shows how much talent that guy had in the 80s and 90s, which is, he was immensely powerful at that time. I mainly like him for that period, up until like around Sleepy Hollow. I know everyone else gives up around Ed Wood, but I like Mars Attacks and Sleepy Hollow, so whatever. But he had an amazing period at the top of pop culture and everything like that. But I think it was because he was a fucking great director. It wasn't just the spooky stuff and he listens to The Cure and that's cool, but like it was because he was able to bring it with this film, and I think they were able to tap into something and show people wanted to see these heroes on screen, but also to show they wanted a dark, gritty Batman, and people would be amazingly fascinated by it. Something that we've never given up on after this film. This is probably one of the most important moments for Batman, as superhero movies, for blockbuster cinema, everything like that. But forgetting all that and its influence, everything, it is a good fucking movie, and I look at it as its period and almost feels ripped apart from it, and also the biggest point of the zeitgeist at the same time. Like it feels like not something that should exist then, but also was all there was almost. And 1989 was a killer summer movie season, and it just destroyed everything. It's very hard to understate the importance of this film. I think if you haven't seen it, it might feel a little dated now, but its influence and its wake are something that we're still living in. It is something that changed Batman forever and showed everyone what Batman could be. And I think there are a lot of people who wouldn't read Frank Miller or wouldn't read Dark Knight Returns had it not been for this film. This is the film that made Batman the dark and gritty Batman. They might have done it with, the Tim Burton kind of Art Deco strangeness, but they did it. I kind of applaud him for going so far with it. Obviously, they brought it down at a certain point with Nolan and now Matt Reeves and stuff, but I think I like my Batman with all this. Its greatest legacy might be, for me, the animated series. That's the thing I probably enjoy most, but at the same time, I think it's still an amazing piece of work that probably could have only been done in its time, but for 89, what a time it was. And I think Batman came and swooped down and surprised us all and then swooped away, and we have to wait like a decade for this whole thing to really get going. I think Batman definitely showed us the way, and much like the end where you see the bat signal, the music's churning, it's like going crazy, and Danny Elfman's going like fucking nuts over there, and Batman's just looking at the signal. It kind of showed us the signal to what film history and the film business would be. We just couldn't see it for about a decade. Batman kind of showed us what we all wanted to see, even though I guess they didn't know it and we didn't know it, or we didn't know what it was going to fully introduce, much like how Batman didn't know what he was going to do to Gotham. I don't think this film knew what it was going to do to everyone involved in film history and film culture in general. So if you have seen Batman 1989 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. So this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Thank you very much for watching.